Welcome, welcome, welcome everybody to the final session of our wonderful Hadrian's Wall networking days for 2022. So this is our wrap up and looking forward session. And I confess I've just been searching the house to see if I could find any chocolate, and I couldn't. I was unsuccessful. So that was that's probably good for the waistline, but not so good for the final hour. So if anybody else wants to take over as chair, just unmute and take over. But it's great to have you all here, and more people might be joining, and Kerry will be letting them in. So what we wanted to do today was just have an opportunity to talk a little bit about what's next, to give people the opportunity to reflect on anything that they might have heard over the past few days, to share any comments if you just want to, because we would have been able to have a chat over a coffee if we were all in a room together. But of course, this has been another year when we've gone online. And so just an opportunity to talk amongst yourselves in our final session, and just to share anything, do a little bulletin board. There's just a couple of things that we've got coming up on the schedule that it might be interesting for people to know about. I will be having the conversation about evaluation. In fact, I'm going to do that now. So really, really important part of Kerry and Catherine's work is to reflect on what you honestly felt that this week was like, but also there'll be options in the form for you to talk about what you want Kerry to know about what you would like to be doing for the rest of the year. And so as a participant to the conference, you will be receiving an evaluation email probably in the next day or so, and if you can attend to that, because it's really, really helpful. And in fact, your previous comments from previous years have of course influenced the content for this conference. So this was very much what you wanted to be talking about this year. So just to kick us off, Kerry, I know that you have got a slide for us, haven't you, which talks a little bit about the looking forward bit. So are you okay to do that now?
Yeah, of course.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
So what I shall do, can people see that okay? It's literally one slide, and it was just to take people through WallCAP going forward for the next 6 months of WallCAP until the end of September, the type of things that we'll be getting up to, and also beyond. There's been a bit of talk about WallCAP ends, and there's this whole sort of shock statement that, well, it just ends. But actually, we're building quite a lot of legacy. So hopefully the impact and the benefits and the successes of WallCAP can continue going forward. So this is really just a very quick list of what's going to be happening over the next 6 months in WallCAP and beyond. So first off, data analysis, Postx and publications. We're based at the university. We have a very strong research agenda within WallCAP, as you know, as for volunteers who've participated with us, you know that steers a lot of what we've done in terms of the excavations and the stone sourcing and dispersal work. So we are, you might not see Jane Harrison and Ian Keel, our community archaeologist and community geologist, very much over the next few weeks, months, because they're going to have their head down writing. So there is a lot to produce, and that includes my work as well with the volunteers. We're doing a lot of analysis on the types of people that have been involved in WallCAP and the sort of journeys that they've been on. And there's a lot of publications, journal articles, papers, conferences, that kind of thing, where we can disseminate a lot of what we've learned at WallCAP, which is a tremendous amount. An exciting project that we're just about to launch, given we've got another 6 months or so, is the Village Atlas project. And this is a programme where we've identified 6 locations along the whole of the World Heritage Site that we want to sort of drill down and look at in terms of if you think of it as like the biography of the landscape, so looking at the historic maps for these different locations and building up a biography of how that land's been used, how communities have connected with Hadrian's Wall over that time. Obviously, obviously the historic maps are a lot younger than Hadrian's Wall, so the wall should hopefully be on all of those maps. And we're going to focus our efforts on 6 locations, which I don't want to mention yet because we haven't spoken directly to those communities. So I would hate for this to be the way that they find out that they're on our sort of hit list, but we are wanting to revisit sites where we've done work before or we have a good relationship, and also there's a nice geographic spread and rural and urban. So we've been quite savvy with how we've chosen those sites, and we've just commissioned the archaeological practice based in Newcastle to do a lot of that work for us. So myself and Catherine will be assisting them in their work, idea being that at the end we'll have 6 different booklets produced, which will include all of the geological information and the mapping data and the LiDAR and looking at aerial photos, as well as liaising with those local groups. And we'd quite like to do some test pitting in those locations. So what Chloe was talking about the other day, people seem to get really excited about that, which I was really warmed by, because we would like to dig in gardens potentially, a very small scale, but that's something that we'd like to do in these 6 locations. So we'll have this sort of raft of booklets for each location that we can give to that village or community. They can put them in the village hall, in the local tea room, and they can really celebrate the sort of historical development of their township or their local area, but also then collate all 6 into one big Hadrian's Wall village atlas, so that we'll sort of top and tail that document with some more geological information, some archaeological information as well, so that we'll have a village atlas for Hadrian's Wall, which this idea of a village atlas, they sort of exist in different areas across the northeast. It's sort of like a methodology that kind of works in terms of going into an area and researching and producing a document. So we're just trying to replicate that methodology along Hadrian's Wall. We think it's a really nice way for community groups to get involved in helping us understand particularly their areas. So the Village Atlas project is due to start very soon and finish by sort of August time, ready for the end of WallCAP. The Community Talks programme will continue. So our monthly programme of talks came out of last year's networking day, when we thought, we've just done 5 days of intense sort of conference. Why don't we just expand this across the year and just do a talk every month, which is what we did. And that was on the back of all the feedback from participants like yourself. So the topics that were suggested in the evaluation form that you'll get probably tomorrow, feel free to put on there whatever you want to know more about. And it's my kind of job to make sure that happens. So we'll continue this online talks program because it's just so accessible for people. So that's kind of a commitment from today that will continue to happen over the next 6 months. Because we are a community archaeology project and we have community in the title, then we are just trying to badge up as much of our activity for the 1900th celebration year as possible. So you'll see a lot more WallCAP events with the 1900th badge on, so keep an eye out for those. So you'll see those on our website or on the 1900th website. That's kind of the things that we'll be doing between now and September. Also, one thing that's on that list there is the Volunteer Legacy Group. Our funder is the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and they're all about celebrating participation and connection with heritage for individuals and community groups. So one thing that we always said right at the start of WallCAP is that when we've got these 3-year funding cycles, what happens at the end of that cycle? And inevitably, either we signpost volunteers to different places, to different organisations, or some things do just come to an end because we've lost that sort of momentum. Right from the start of WallCAP, we built in the fact that we would have sort of our legacy group, but what I'm finding is that we're probably going to have a number of legacy groups. So how we've done this is every year we ask our WallCAP volunteers to complete a volunteer satisfaction questionnaire in the autumn. And at the minute we have around 400 volunteers signed up to our online portal, and we sent them the questionnaire, and we put in a specific question about is anyone interested in becoming part of or setting up or being supported in being established as a legacy group. Not everybody responded, but we had the highest response rate that we've ever had to our questionnaire. And we were really warm because in the answer to that question, 48% of our volunteers said that, yes, they would like to do something beyond the end of WallCAP. The next question was, what sort of stuff would you like to do? And the top sort of rated activities were monitoring, research and conservation, practical conservation work, and events. So there are 4 things that we know there's an appetite for people to do. We then asked the volunteers if they were sort of saying yes to these questions. We asked, how much support would you like to be completely sort of on your own, off you go and set up your own agenda and do your own work? Do you want to be absolutely under the wing of somebody or an organization and kind of work very closely, or do you want something in between where you have a bit of autonomy to make your own decisions but have the guidance of maybe a member of staff? And that's the middle option, is what our volunteers want to do. So I know there's an appetite within the WallCAP volunteers to do some great work basically on the back of WallCAP. One thing we thought we could do in the interim is support our volunteers in developing some activities for the 1900 celebration. So it hits that event option that people ticked. But while Catherine and myself and the rest of the team are around for another 6 months, we can support that group in almost getting some quick wins, getting some experience and events and activities under their belt whilst we are still around. And then that group might then want to go on and do things beyond WallCAP. But again, it's we're in very, very early stages. We're about to set up a meeting for the volunteers for that first kind of meeting of like, where do we go from here? What do we do next? The idea of the monitoring, research and conservation, we know there's more work to do. We need to revisit Wall Watch, which was a condition monitoring programme for Hadrian's Wall, where we a few years ago recruited volunteers to adopt a section of the scheduled monument. There's 144 sequential areas of scheduled monument all the way along the frontier, and we at one point had volunteers allocated to those sections. Lots of change in momentum and emphasis, and that's kind of gone a bit quiet. So we're looking to maybe revisit that, because we think if the volunteers are interested in monitoring and conservation, that will be a really, really nice way for them to become eyes and ears on the ground again. But we need to look at what that looks like, because potentially there won't be the capacity in post to coordinate that unless the volunteer group maybe wanted to do that themselves. So there's lots in there. The volunteer legacy stuff is kind of top of my list at the moment. What we do, how we do it, and finding those individuals who maybe want to take a bit more of a lead in that group or those groups. There's a whole suite of activities that people could get involved with post WallCAP. There is no way that we are turning that database off, that volunteer portal off at the end of September and walking away. There is no way that's happening. I can give some kind of confirmation, because I feel really strongly about that. And then the sort of lasting legacy on that list is the GIS that Catherine spoke to us about last night. And as Catherine said, there's obviously a lot of detail and a lot of content gone into that, and a version of that GIS will be available for free for everybody beyond the end of WallCAP. So we're busy, but we're also busy trying to future-proof all of the skills, enthusiasm, expertise that we've sort of helped sort of generate throughout the WallCAP programme. So it's a very, very exciting time actually, and things like 1900th and you know, getting communities involved in Hadrian's Wall, we're in such a good position to really support that from a WallCAP perspective. But also, you know, 10-15 years ago, I don't think we were ready for that along the wall, but community groups and individuals and volunteers, there's been this momentum that's been building and building, and now is a very exciting year. So if we can support current WallCAP volunteers and community groups into getting involved in this sort of legacy work, then that'll be a huge success. So it's, yeah, the future's not quite as doom and gloom as end in September and that's it. Hopefully this is just the start of just a new way of engaging communities and volunteers along the wall.
Kerry, that's really fantastic, and you're absolutely right. There's no way that taps are just going to get turned off and then everybody and all their effort and all their fun and all their enjoyment and all their relationships are just going to disappear. That's not what the plan is. So great, okay. So the first thing to say is you're all avid users of the WallCAP website. Just add in first thing in the morning, as you're having your first hot drink, and you will obviously be logging, obviously you're going to be logging straight onto WallCAP, just add in 1900 into there as well, because you may find out that there's an event happening right next door to you, and you can just turn up, or you can plan weekends or evenings off or days off where you can join in the other events. I was with Bill Griffiths, the chair of the steering group, the other night. There's about 270 events that are on the stocks at the moment. There are more. Oh, Bill, have you just had an espresso? Have you just had a little shot? Oh, that's what I should have done. When I found out there was no chocolate, I just saw your espresso cup and thought that's what I should have done. So there's about 270 events already on the stocks, but we all know of events that are not yet listed, simply because it's the whole year, and we're only in early March, and we have right through till Saturnalia on the 23rd of December to go. So keep your eyes open on that website. Think about creating an event yourself. What this conference absolutely underlines to everybody is that it's not an experts conference. It's not an experts festival. It's not only somebody who's got a PhD, a title in front of their name, and who has spent their entire life dedicated to the study of Hadrian's Wall, who are engaging in the events in 1900. I would say it's sort of like almost the opposite of that. There are a few conferences and events, and one of them I'll talk about in a moment, where everybody seems to be professor this or doctor that, but mostly it's about people who live and love the wall, putting on something which is beneficial for them, and numbers are not important. It doesn't matter how many people you get at your event, but you might be surprised at how many people you do get at your event. But one of the clear messages from today was that volunteer pathways need to be more clearly established. And Abby, certainly, for those of you who weren't able to make Abby's talk this morning, she talks about volunteers, more clarity around volunteering for 1900 becoming more apparent this month. So I think that will be really good for those of us who aren't going to organise our event for ourselves, but just actually could lend a hand to somebody else's event. I think that we're really going to be ramping that up. So those are the two things that two websites that you should be checking out every morning after you've listened to the news. Right, before I sort of go on to bits and pieces of my paperworky stuff, shall we just see whether anybody wants to come in on anything? Got Barbara and then David Bruff, please.
Hi, just following on from this afternoon from David and Chris's talks about peace. Of course, we're all thinking about peace. And I had a question written down, and you mentioned it, Jay. How do we equate Hadrian's Wall with peace when, in effect, it's a physical representation of 300 years of military occupation by a foreign power? I mean, yes, it's very relevant today. So how do you ignore it? Do you ignore it? Do you know, as you said, yes, but look what the Romans did for us. But without, I don't know.
Barbara, it's in my head all the time, and it's been emphasised this week. And yeah. I wrote something down for my speech tomorrow that I'm making tomorrow. The use of the word occupation. That's from a Wikipedia page about something that I'm going to be speaking about at Tully House. And so as I typed occupation, I thought, hang on a minute. And so I wanted to raise that in the context. That's how I'm feeling at the moment. Yeah. Now, David, your hand was up for a separate issue. John wants to come on this. I would really value a couple of moments now to have this discussion of Barbara's really, really relevant points. So, John, if I can ask you to go first, I'd be interested in what Chris thought, but I'd like to know what others think too.
Indeed, I just and I don't want to hog the mic, and I've been speaking a lot this afternoon, but Barbara, thank you for that question, because it's the one to ask basically at this particular point, isn't it? There are two things for me that I want to throw into the discussion, see what you make of it. One, it gives us the length of time to review what occupation looks like. So we're talking about a historical occupation by an army in a country, and how that has shaped and defined that country. We can see it with hindsight due to history. We can see it without the wailing and the gnashing of teeth and the emotion and the death and destruction, or the opportunities actually that brings. And so we can study what that looks like through a length of time without emotion. So that's one way of looking at it for me. But the more immediate one, and the one that I always quote, is if you look at the wall as a barrier, if you look at it straight, it's a binary process. Are you in, are you out of the occupational area? But if you turn your head 90 degrees and look along the wall, it is that connecting string along the entirety of the Roman frontier, going through all of those countries which exist throughout Europe, the Near East and North Africa. We share that, and we spoke about this earlier, share that common heritage with. So we have already the opening of a discussion with a person that we've never met, but lives in the centre of pick a country, Germany, pick a country, Morocco, or Libya, for example. We have the opener of a conversation. We don't have to try and struggle to find that common ground. So it's got two things for peace: one as a study object, but one as a common denominator amongst people that still exist today. In that sense, there's my two opening gambits on that side of things.
Thank you.
Any more contributions on this?
Jane, if I may just, and without getting into a vast debate about Roman history, some of you, and it's picking up on a point that Jez made earlier today. From Augustus onwards, the Roman Empire had been expanding and expanding and expanding, and had been constantly at war. And in the AD 70s, I think under Vespasian, Agricola went all the way up into Scotland, culminating in Mons Graupius and the massacre of the Scottish tribes. Hadrian turns up in AD 17 and he says, enough of this. The empire is going no further. We're going to draw boundaries around the empire, and we're going to stop this expansion and this perpetual state of war. That was obviously reversed later by Antoninus Pius and Septimus Severus later, and others. But Hadrian was actually one of the few, in my book, good guys when it comes to the peace agenda out of the vast gallery of Roman emperors. Just an opinion.
Yeah, Graham says very good point. Chris, and then Nick.
Yeah, my contribution really is similar to John's. I think that the very fact that Hadrian's Wall is a part of a serial site with a reach 5,000 kilometers plus, we hope ultimately to the Black Sea, but certainly to the German Limes and beyond at the moment, does exactly what we want at the moment, which is to provide the potential for international cooperation, which in itself is what should underpin peace. So I think, notwithstanding the history, and that we can learn from the history as well, that's Churchill's old point, as a World Heritage Site, you have this great advantage of the connection across Europe. And you could say, and at a time when we just left Europe, that's exactly what we need.
Thank you, Chris. Nick.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point, and it's definitely not wanting to ignore the Roman occupation side. But I always found from a perspective of working on Hadrian's Wall, the way that we get, it's drawing international visitors in who then form that personal connection, even though the history of it, you can think about the occupation, but then in terms of like a modern context, it's always quite like the fact that you get these people from throughout the world coming, meeting people from Canada, America, Europe, Far East, China, and other places, and then they form a really personal connection to what we have in our backyard and get excited and enthused about it, and then take that back with them, as well as all of the impressions of the people that live in the north and sort of along the line of Hadrian's Wall now, and kind of take it away. So I always think it's in terms of sort of an ambassador, people becoming kind of an ambassador for our area. It helps people become that internationally, and then take away a piece of sort of what it means to be from here with them.
Yeah, I really
Jane,
nice point there, Nick.
Jane, can I just join in and add on to the end of Nick's comment just then, just to sort of square that circle. A couple of years ago, we worked with a tiny school, Lanercost Primary School, out there on the west end of the Wall. And what they wanted to do was, they studied the Romans, but actually the subplot of the head teacher was, all these kids live on farms, and it's a kind of monocultural sort of existence. And yet all those international visitors were tromping past their front door effectively. And she was very keen to expose her young classes to this international audience. So that's the sort of squaring of the circle, isn't it? You know, so it's, yes, we're attracting international tourists and they're valuing the World Heritage Site, but then the people that live along the World Heritage Site were being exposed to this wider diaspora of people, even though Hadrian's Wall rurally is quite a monocultural environment in that sense. So, you know, I loved that interplay between the two sides of that World Heritage role that it has.
One of the trends in international tourism at the moment, the really sort of go-getting destinations who are leading world tourism, have coined this phrase temporary localhood. And I think that is a really important new tourism trend, that people who visit want to immerse themselves in local culture. They don't want to be just bussed in and have their own see the local culture through their own eyes. They want to be amongst the people who actually live there. That's I suppose Irish people might call it the crack. And you know, this is our pub, this is our musical heritage, this is who we are, this is our personality. You can join in, you're really welcome, but we're not changing to become what you might want us to be. We're just being authentically ourselves. And I don't think there is a better place in the world than Hadrian's Wall where temporary localhood can happen. And it's something I feel very strongly about, that Chris has highlighted in his talk about the potential for the wall to work economically for us as the current population. So don't be surprised if when international tourists come back, they don't actually want to do the yoga class in the local community centre when they're staying in our midst, because actually people want a home from home. They want to join into the local community's lives. And some people might be thinking back to, well, everybody says that, don't they? What would it have been like 2,000 years ago to be at this wall and to look out onto this landscape, which often is very unchanged, and to immerse yourself in that temporary localhood? So actually, I think it's not answering the current dilemma that Barbara feels at the moment and that I feel at the moment about how do you sort of justify making tourism out of an unwelcome occupation at the beginning, certainly, but actually we are where we are, and for our local communities now we've been shaped by that. John?
I just wanted to ask Barbara, what were your thoughts when you posed that question about peace, and where had your mind been going during the course of the discussions that we've had over the day?
No, my mind's where everybody else's is this week, you know, and that just, you know, it's this week's events that brought me back to this. You know, my question, we've got a foreign military power going into Ukraine. And I think, would we be celebrating the Berlin Wall in the same way if it was still there? Or, you know, I mean, for me, Hadrian's Wall is not, I'm not a Romanist, it's its location. Mm-hmm. I have to admit to that. And yeah, in the history, and they left the history, they left their written records. So we don't know what the locals think, really. So, yeah. So it's hard to, I wasn't thinking about it. It's only this week I've thought about that.
But Barbara, when we did the Living Wall, and I was privileged to work on setting up the Living Wall in Tully House, you know, all the video clips and stuff that are in there.
Okay, yeah.
And that work was undertaken by a BBC researcher that we hired in to help with that. Yeah. And we weren't really, if I'm going to be honest, none of the team were really sure what that was going to end up looking like by the time we finished. Okay. But as soon as we saw the footage that came back of all the different borders and barriers and so forth, those objects that were in the cases in the rest of the gallery took on a whole different context, because I mentioned the wailing and the gnashing of teeth and the blood and the opportunities being absent in the distance of time. Those videos gave us back the people and the emotions and the so forth that were being felt and experienced on Hadrian's Wall during that particular time. And it was a really powerful thing to not just go and look at, but actually put together. And I think everybody that worked on that project was changed by the time they'd finished putting the wall together, and saw the dry objects in a case completely differently when they saw the faces and things that were being used on those video clips. So exactly the same sort of thing that you were saying.
Yeah. No, it's just this week's events, you know, it colours everything. So yeah. Yeah.
It does. So 1900 years, 2000 years. So I'm trying to work out what that means in terms of generations. So we talk about a generation being sort of between 25 and 30 years, because we've got the people living much longer, let's say 30 years. So I just did some sums earlier on, and we're talking about our great grandfathers 23 times back. And put in that context, it feels like that link, like that handover. You know, you serve in the Roman army for 25 years, then you get your retirement papers and you're officially allowed to say that your wife, who you would have absolutely had for many years before, you were legally able to say she was your wife, and your children you're legally able to adopt, and your children become Roman citizens, and many of them stay. And, you know, you look at the Roman names for all so many towns in Great Britain, and they're formed as retirement towns for Roman soldiers. And so there's the family tree, the DNA of Hadrian's Wall, with that mass diversity. Syrian, I was out for dinner last night, somebody said Syrian archers. Tell me about the Syrian archers. You know, this is not contested, this is fact, because it is written down, as Barbara says. The the Celts didn't write things down, we did, the Romans did. So you've just got this DNA, this intermarrying, this settling, this making something out of the environment, this making something out of the soil, this making something out of trading relationships. And then 23 great grandfathers later, here we are in 2022, having this community where we talk about Hadrian's Wall and what it means for us. And as we've said many times over this week, the festival of 1900 is a bit about Romans. That, you know, absolutely it is a bit about Romans, and it's even a bit about Roman soldiers, but actually it's just about what's happened since. David.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to what Kerry presented us with just before we got on to that conversation. And it's great to hear that, you know, there are plans afoot to set up the volunteer legacy group, and that, you know, the tap isn't going to be turned off completely. On that theme, what I'd like to ask Kerry is what, if you like, continuity arrangements might be being made or thought about the continuation of what Claire was talking to us about, the youth ambassadors, because I think that's really, really important that we do what we can to keep that going, because as was said during that presentation, you know, these people are going to be the future. Down the line, these people are going to be replacing us in keeping the show on the road.
Thanks, David. Sorry, I saw Chris's hand up there. I don't know if you want to respond regarding youth ambassadors. I'm actually going to bring Nick in, because Nick's been driving this. All I've done is sat behind and help with some meetings and delivery of some training. So WallCAP can't take a lot of the credit for youth ambassadors. So I'm going to bring Nick in. But I think, Chris, I don't know if you want to...
Yes, Chris first, and then Nick, please.
Okay, just a quick one to let you know, you may know already, that the ambassador scheme at Blaenavon World Heritage Site was one of the first and very successful. I often use the anecdote in explaining the importance of the ambassadors as follows, which is that it is fact that in Blaenavon they started off a good, say, 10 years ago, I'm not sure the exact time, and there were 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds involved in feeling hugely proud about their site and relating it to Taj Mahal, etc. What were then kids are now 20 and 21-year-olds. They have the notion and concept and values of World Heritage instilled in their brains. So David is quite right that they are the next generation of passion, next generation of passion for World Heritage Site that we will have within us, but actually we do need some follow-up too. So it is incredibly important that continues.
So Nick, that's a perfect opening for you to tell us what's happening, because of course that programme was your inspiration, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had a chat with Ashley from Glenavon earlier this week, actually, and she mentioned some of the youth ambassadors that they had who were doing it when they were sort of 10, 11 years old, having gone on to help run the programme as they're kind of grown up, which I think is a fantastic, one of the sort of fantastic results, and getting involved in the World Heritage for another generation after them. But yeah, this year we're currently in the process of, for those who weren't able to see Claire's talks, when the recordings are available, definitely tune in and so watch it. We're in the process of recruiting for this year for our sort of cohort of YAMs, out of youth ambassadors. And this is the last year of the pilot program that we were sort of signed up to with Glenavon. However, I think with the interest from the partners is definitely to continue it and to build on the sort of foundations that have been laid this year, as it being the first time we've ever run a youth ambassadors along the line of Hadrian's Wall, and to sort of continue in future. So I think there is an appetite within the partners to do that, and it will be the case that will happen. And I must say that Kerry very much downplayed how instrumental she was in getting it to happen, and getting things off the ground, and all the hard work that she's put in as well. But no, I completely agree, and it's one of the things I've been quite excited about and very glad that it's seeing it kind of develop. And but yeah, the appetite among all the partners in the steering group is definitely for it to continue in future after this year, and after we sort of finished our obligations with Glenavon, and to continue quite likely working with Ashley too.
So Chris, perhaps you could feed back to your partners when you're next at one of your meetings that we were directly influenced by another fellow World Heritage site in the UK to create the programme, directly as a result of that.
I certainly will.
Thank you. Thanks for that good topic, David. So any more thoughts from anybody? John, you're leaning forward. Are you wishing to unmute yourself?
I just wanted to make an observation. Every year we sit down, the we being, I've got to raise a hand to Catherine and to Kerry for their organisation of this week, and thank you very much for all the hard work that you two have put into this and making this happen. And every year and we've done this for many years now, Kerry, haven't we? And Catherine's joined us for the last couple. We try and give you the widest selection of topics that all relate to the work that we do day in, day out along the World Heritage Site that isn't Roman. So we start off with the premise that we're not going to tell you anything about Roman, but we're going to tell you all about the World Heritage Site and all the things that happen. Hence, over the years, you've heard about buses and trains and everything else that's gone along. And we'll talk about cycleways probably next year and all that sort of stuff. I'm looking at the programme right now in front of me, and I'm just amazed this year how random we made this programme, Kerry, but every single part has overlapped, and we've constantly spent the week referencing back to somebody else's talk, and just how interlaced these very disparate but connected subjects seem to be. I don't know whether everybody else has sort of sensed that as they've gone through the various sessions. If you have, then that's been completely incidental, but just shows you that it's our sort of combined brains and the things. These are the things that operate in our heads on a daily basis, and it's sort of, you can see the interlacing of them all. It just occurred to me, Jane, that while we were here, that's the case.
No, I completely agree. I have my programme also clipboarded in front of me, and it's been another fantastic year for really diverse and interesting topics, and so much to report on in terms of excavations and the expertise which has been displayed by the WallCAP community. I mean, you know, just that it's just amazing the skills that you all have in your various volunteering roles, the sort of the levels of expertise that you bring. The reason why this is such a great project to work on is because there is no intellectual trumpery, John, is there, in this community? There is no my PhD is bigger than your PhD.
No, absolutely not. I think that everybody is incredibly level about it all, including everybody on this screen as well. You are part of the team. I make no difference between paid, unpaid, east, west, north, south, old, young, you name it, you can do it, and we're all part of the same gang. So it's never been one person on their own. It's often quoted, Chris, when it's rubbish when they say there's just one or two people. In the actual fact, I can tell you that Hadrian's Wall has got a staff team of thousands and a budget which goes with many, many noughts, because every single site, every single community, every single volunteer plays their part to make it happen. So if we do good stuff, it's not due to me, it's due to the faces on this screen and many, many more that have joined us over the course of this week. And I wish they were all here so we could say thank you to them all in one go. So yeah, it's a level playing field in that sort of sense.
And actually, what this program does is it's the sort of walk to the weft. So where the wefters have to sometimes be in their silos, you know, your day job at English Heritage or your day job at Historic England or what have you. But what WallCAP does is it just threads all that work together. And just it's, you know, it's such a strong fabric because it has got such a strong warp and a weft. David.
Yeah, I've just been going back through my notes over the however many days it is, 4, I guess, and I've just highlighted 3 things which I just thought I'd flag up with you. Firstly is, Kerry, let's have a conversation about how we might go about pursuing that idea of village champions for 1900. Okay, John, I'm going to keep asking you, are we a member of the cultural roots of Europe yet? I'm just forewarning you, I'm going to do that probably on a fortnightly basis. And lastly, for Catherine, when you were presenting on the GIS scheme system, I wrote in my notes, Hadrian's Wall GIS equals a data palimpsest. There you go. I thought you might like that one. No comment needed.
I was going to say that I'm going to have to Google that word. I think, David. So Lee couldn't agree with you more. Lee, I don't know why you just typed that. Do you not just want to say that? Would you like to just open up and say that?
Yeah, I've heard John quite often through the course of the last few days say other people play down the role quite a bit, but I think he's probably one of the main people who does that. Since last year, whenever John's spoken, I've just found him engaging, enthusiastic about his subject matter, and a little quip there at the end, just saying it's actually infectious, but in a good way.
Kerry's the one that's infectious.
Yeah. Yeah, if we're coming into the final straight, actually, it is appropriate now, I think, to say some thank yous. Although I have to tell you, none of the staff who organised this want the big thanks. That's not why they do it. However, we couldn't do it without Kerry and Catherine. And if you remember last year, we had Marianne. It was a team of 3, and actually Kerry and Catherine have done it together this year as a team of 2, and Kerry does have COVID. So one of the good things about being online is that actually it sort of shows, Chris and I just had a quick chat about this earlier on, the timing of this actually to do this online and to do this totally online, because we did debate, didn't we, about whether we'd have a day where we all got together and then we would do meetings as well. And we decided that early March, we still felt it was probably more appropriate to be entirely online. And I think that has proven to be the right decision, because otherwise, Kerry, let's say life, went on along the parallel lines and you would have caught COVID. and therefore you would not have been able to come and join us at all. So actually, I think it probably was absolutely the right decision. But I think at 4 o'clock this afternoon, when you turn off your screen, I think you absolutely deserve to immediately go and lie down on your chaise longue and just recover from all the work that you've done. But it's impossible to describe the value you get from the right people being in the right place at the right time. And the WallCAP project, the team, Rob's team, Kerry's team, working with Catherine, working with Jane, working with Ian, working with the visual artist, the sculptor that, you know, was brought in, the people which WallCAP bring in. The way that you all work together is absolutely superb. And I know that there are other volunteer programs out there with volunteer coordinators out there in other World Heritage sites. I know that there are programs out there in the world, but I have never come across a team as brilliant as this team. And you add in, as Lee said, you add in John, best colleague in the world, then you know, it's not surprising that we're able to produce conferences like this. But of course, it's only your input that makes it work, because you influenced the agenda for this conference. You said what you wanted to talk about. You keep the work going. So it is the most extraordinary project, actually. And one of the, you know, the projects that I'm most proud to be allowed to have an involvement in as a volunteer myself. And John always says he's got the best job in the world. I think a lot of us feel that we've got the best job in the world working within the heritage, within the World Heritage Site, within Hadrian's Wall, because it's just like this magnetically compelling project which keeps drawing us all back in. Does anybody else want to say anything lovely, or indeed does anybody want to say anything that isn't lovely but that they just want to say? Because
Jane, you missed somebody out on that whole thank you thing and fetching of the virtual flowers. We have to thank you for your energy and input. If there's ever a person that was the right person in the right place at the right time, it's you. And
well,
a lot of the things that have happened have been because of your energy and enthusiasm and your drive and your constant go-getting. So from Catherine, from Kerry, from Jane, from Ian, from Nick, from the rest of the team, thank you very much for your energy, and thank you very much for supporting us as we go through.
Well, honestly, thank you very much. That's very, very, very kind of you. And it's such an easy project to be involved in, honestly, as you all know, as you all know. But that is really kind. So final thing, one of the final things I want to say is that there is a proper Professor, Doctor, PhD, letters after my name conference happening quite soon at the Senhouse Roman Museum. It's its 30th anniversary conference, and it was postponed from 2020, I think, because of COVID. So actually, if anybody have you bought a ticket, you will know that it's actually been transferred to this 2022 date. So it's the 22nd to the 24th of April. It's going to be held at the Wave, Irish Street, Maryport. Now, doesn't that tell a story? The name of the street, Irish Street, Maryport. And you can either go there in person, and there's lots of links online to where you might stay and to local businesses where you might eat, or you can also be a Zoom delegate, and it's slightly cheaper if you do that. So the topic is celebrating Roman West Cumbria. As I say, it's the 30th anniversary conference at the Senhouse, and the guest of honor is, drum roll, Professor David J. Breeze, who is, and my printer ink ran out, OBE, BA, PhD, FSA, non-FSA Scotland, FRSE, honorary MCIFA. And later on, I will Google to find out all what those letters after David's name mean. But as anybody who's got anything to do with Hadrian's Wall knows, David is one of the most eminent people that we have associated. He's made his life, career, and indeed now his retirement, helping to explain and translate Hadrian's Wall into very accessible ways that we all benefit from. So that will be a fantastic conference. There's lots of other speakers, but my printer ink ran out, Kerry. But I know, oh, actually, I can go over the page because I know that there, yeah, that's right. So Becky Jones is involved from Historic Environment Scotland. Ian Haynes and Tony Wilmot, our own rock star archaeologists, they're going to be talking. Lindsay Allison Jones, of course, from the University of Newcastle, who many of you will know a lot better than me, but she recently retired. But you don't retire from Hadrian's Wall, you carry on with your involvement. And so there's some really, really interesting talks going on. And Kerry thought that you might specifically like to know about that conference, because I think for many of you, the knowledge about Hadrian's Wall, that knowledge that we can be part of, that research agenda, which is so important to you as volunteers, because you're part of that. You are adding your own expertise into that. So she thought that you might be particularly interested. But don't forget, on the website, you will also find out that it's split into months for the 1900th anniversary festival. So it's split into months. So you would see your own picture in March, because obviously this conference is listed. So there are many, many events. And don't forget, you can just be knitting bunting for the Vindolanda bunting celebration later on in the year. You can be passing that. I think there's a crochet pattern and a knitting pattern available from Vindolanda. So keep on checking the website at things that are happening locally, and consider what events that you might want to run yourself. Right, final word from anybody. We've said our thanks, we've said our hellos, we've had a really good discussion about what I find to be very difficult topics at the moment. Thanks to Barbara for those that really good intervention. But if there's nothing else, why don't we close now 5 minutes early? Has there ever been a conference which closed 5 minutes early? I'm going to go and get myself a little shot of espresso, which will help me with the rest of my afternoon. Thank you very much to Bill for reminding me that's what I need. So let's just say goodbye to each other, and see you soon. See you soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.